Would have been a lot easier to solve this years ago before they were in the position that they're in. But we will see what happens. We think that lots of good things could happen, and we could also have a bad solution. But we think lots of good things can happen.
What would be a bad solution, sir?
I think you know the answer to that.
And President Trump appearing to dial back the rhetoric on North Korea after days of military threats against the rogue regime. This comes as several members of the Trump administration continue to stress the need for diplomacy while still backing the president. We've got Florida Congressman Rooney, who sits on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, joining us now to discuss all this. Glad to see you here today. And we want to start with, just what has taken place this week. What can you share with us on what's being discussed within the Foreign Affairs Committee with so much going on?
Well, first, I think it's important that the president laid down the markers earlier in the week that we mean business and we're going to protect American strategic interests at all costs. There's an analogy there to the Cuban Missile Crisis. He's got to set that stage so that China and Russia and everybody else takes us seriously. But followed up by what Secretary Tillerson did by saying we're not seeking regime change. We just want the guy to stop the nuclearization and then we can talk. 16 years of talks while he continued nuclearization have resulted in nothing. So it's time to reset the situation and call on him to make the first act.
What do you think of the president's style of communication? Is it working right now? Obviously, we've seen a lot go on this last week, especially on Twitter.
Well, everyone has their own style, and the president certainly has his. But I think if you look at what the Global Times in Beijing said today or last night, when they said, China really should not support North Korea if they commit aggressive act, and certainly should remain neutral should the United States respond, kind of gives me a feeling that some of this back-channel diplomacy might be starting to work.
With this conversation that the president had with the president of China, President Xi, what does it mean in terms of progress? Because he's also been raising a trade war with China at the same time. So in terms of walking both sides of the street on this, is it a good time to be doing that?
Well, he started out with the currency manipulation thing, and there hasn't been much talk about that lately. I think that we need to meet China halfway. If they jump into this and help us solve the problem, we're going to need to deal with trade, but we need to deal with trade in a mutually beneficial manner.
And, just taking a look forward as we move into the rest of the summer, getting into the fall, where do you think this should go? What do you want to see happen coming out of the White House on this?
I want to see this Kim Jong-un madman realize that he's waging an existential threat to himself, that the whole world's united against him, including his neighbors, Russia and China, and to see him agree to stop the nuclear testing and sit down at the table with the community of nations.
All right, Florida Congressman Rooney, thank you so much for being with us today. We always appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Thank you for having me on.